Welcome to the FGS Horror Club, where I shine a spotlight on the best in horror, and maybe your new favorite game you just don't know about yet. I'm a filmmaker at heart, but video games are what I spend most of my time doing. And I'm a huge fan of when those two things that I love come together. It's just a shame that most games based on movies, they just suck, and vice versa. I grew up at a time where every major movie release, even slightly aimed at my demographic, was getting shoddy, messy tie-in titles, from Ratatouille to Alvin and the Chipmunks. But my love of horror pays off sometimes. Horror movies have had some of the best game adaptations in the space, and we're going to look at 5 of the best right now. One of my favorite movies of all time is Evil Dead 2, and just last year a game released as a celebration of the whole Evil Dead franchise, and it's actually pretty good. Evil Dead the game initially looked like a Dead by Daylight style, asymmetrical multiplayer affair, but feels more like an evolution, or should I say, evolution of that formula. Big maps, plenty of fun weapons to utilize, and fun, grisly enemies to play as and go up against, as well as a varied mission structure makes this one of the best and maybe the most underrated asymmetrical horror game out there right now. And I'm not the only one that thinks so. The game is currently sitting at a 76 on Metacritic. The game is available anywhere you play games, Switch excluded, and it carries a friendly £30 price tag, so it shouldn't be as hard to get some friends looped in to brutalize some deadites. The PS1 is my favorite console of all time. It was a time when modern gaming standards were still being set up, and studios were just being given money to make whatever they thought would work, leading to some crazy creations. Alien Resurrection is not as crazy as it gets, but it's a unique taste, in that it not only outdoes the terrible, terrible movie that it's based on in terms of quality, but it's actually a high point for what the console is capable of. The full 3D environments are atmospheric and well realized, combat is punishing and frenetic, and it's paced surprisingly well, and fans of more atmospheric shooters like Doom 3 should really go and check it out. The most interesting thing, though, are its controls. If you were to pick up this game now and start playing it, you wouldn't notice anything strange, and that's the crazy part. This game helped set the standard for how games controlled, but at the time, it wasn't entirely well received, leading to one of my favorite game review quotes ever. The game's control setup is its most terrifying element. The left stick moves you forward, back, and strafes, whilst the right stick turns you and can be used to look up and down. You'll be wondering how Sony let this get by without requesting a few different control configuration options.
Okay, I got a new game. Tag.
Speaking of things which redefine an entire genre, the Blair Witch Project is a classic that still holds up to this day, and it's had a colourful gaming history, from the original ARG related to its release, to the fascinating X-Files and Twin Peaks style Blair Witch volumes on PlayStation 2. But just a few years ago in 2019, Bloober Team gave us Blair Witch, which tonally sits in a comfortable midpoint between the original game and the awful 2018 reboot movie. In this game, you get lost in the woods searching for a lost boy and find yourself in the grasp of the witch. To make things worse, you're suffering from pretty bad PTSD from your time in the military, for which your very handy service dog can only help so much.
Peel! You want one of these, buddy?
This game has a unique mechanic of being able to control time using a handheld camera, and at some points it even echoes the combat from Alan Wake using light. This drops a lot of what made the original movie great in my opinion, especially in its lack of ambiguity that the witch is, in fact, a very real force in these woods, but focuses instead on doing its own thing, and actually ends up being pretty good for it. For my money, this is one of Bloober's best, and you can play the game anywhere you play games. I mean it this time. PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, even in VR.
You killed them, Ellis.
What?
You're a murderer and a coward.
No.
I'm leaving, Ellis. You know what you need to do? Be a man for once.
John Carpenter's The Thing is my favorite movie of all time, and the PlayStation 2 has a game that expands on the movie's story and world. In fact, John Carpenter has said in the past that he considers the game to be the canon sequel over the comic book series. But he's also a big gamer after all, so it just makes sense.
What do you do when you're not working? Like, how do you chill and relax? What do you do for fun?
I play video games. I watch NBA basketball. I watch the news. I play video games.
You play as the leader of a team of agents sent to investigate the Antarctic research base that went dark a few weeks ago, only to find the remnants of the end of the movie. Sadly, it seems McCready and co. didn't fully dispatch the alien menace, as you'll have to face creatures galore across several locations. The scary part comes when you start recruiting people into your team. You alone aren't strong enough to take out the hordes of things coming for you, so you'll need to have others to help you out. But any of them could be a thing. This mostly isn't scripted either. Any of your team members can become a thing at random, and can spread it to other team members. You have to regularly test your team to make sure they are still who they say they are, or you'll have to take them down.
Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
I know I already talked about an Alien game, but how could I possibly make a list of the best horror movie games without mentioning Alien Isolation? No game has ever better captured a film's production design and its art design, the atmosphere, the stakes, than Alien Isolation. The alien in Ridley Scott's original movie feels completely different from the insect-like cannon fodder the rest of the franchise throws at its protagonist in endless numbers. It's the ultimate slasher villain, a wholly inhuman monster that kills indiscriminately and destroys even when injured. The game captures that perfectly, pitting you against just one alien. It's so movie accurate that if you look really closely, you can even see the eye holes that the stunt performer would have used on set. Not that you'd want to, the famously fascinating dual AI system for the monster is voracious and genuinely frightening. This game even tricks you, giving you a host of weapons that, sure, they work great against humans, kinda work against the robots, and they don't even make the xenomorph flinch. You're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't played one of the most tense and frightening games ever made. It originally came out in the PS3 era, but it's also available on PS4 and PS5 as well as the Xbox One and Series. It's even got a Switch port. Be sure not to miss it. It is a great time to be a fan of all things horror games and horror movies, and the midpoint between those two keeps giving us new things to get excited for. Just next week, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre releases, as well as a game based on the B-movie classic Killer Clowns from Outer Space, releasing later this year. Despite its reputation for jump-scare-laden gruesome slashers, I believe that horror as a genre is a breeding ground for experimentation and moving forward the mediums of writing and film. Because in order to scare people, you have to remind them of the things that scare them in real life, which opens the doors to a whole host of metaphor, social commentary, etc. You could make the argument the same is true for games, even if a lot of the innovation is making increasingly child-marketable scary mascots for people named Matthew and or Patrick to ponder over. I'm glad to have taken a look at some of the greatest horror movies of all time and how they've rubbed off on some of the greatest game adaptations. You're part of the club now. If you want to see more horror spotlights like this one every single Tuesday, subscribe to the FGS channel.